Like, totally. I should have said all my political stuff first. Dang. All right.
All right. Thank you, Elmer, and thank you everyone for sharing your visions of Milwaukee. Even though I don't live there, it sounds amazing, and I really want to do my best to help make all of this possible. So before I talk more about how UMA thinks that we can make this happen, I want to share a little bit about myself. I came to my work at Urban Manufacturing Lines as a designer and maker myself, as a small business owner. I did custom fabrication and metal and wood, and then eventually got into the world of textiles. And through that work, I built lots of relationships with lots of other makers and manufacturers, and found out there's lots of shared challenges and barriers to growing our types of businesses. And I found myself much more interested in trying to find ways to create strategies that could help our kind of collective business community. And that's how I got connected to Urban Manufacturing Alliance. And today, my main priority, while I contribute to lots of different projects at UMA, my main priority is helping create entrepreneurial ecosystems that can help both create and scale up maker and manufacturing businesses. And so, what I want to do next is kind of share some details about what local branding initiatives are. And for some of you, this is an introduction to a new strategy. For some of you, this is a refresher as to what these initiatives are. And I'm going to intentionally kind of remain mostly high level, just because of today's conversation. But then I will share a couple of snapshots of what's happening in other cities, and then wrap up with kind of where Milwaukee is today in terms of creating an LBI and getting it up and running. So let me share my screen. All right, can everybody see it? Okay, so local branding initiatives, or LBIs, are organizations that cultivate entrepreneurial ecosystems that respond to the unique needs and qualities of the makers and manufacturers to create equitable, resilient regional economies. LBIs are experts in both manufacturing and entrepreneurship. They work to remove historic barriers to both manufacturing and entrepreneurship, especially for women and BIPOC entrepreneurs. And they emphasize the importance of both place and making, which means they're fostering opportunities to allow companies to grow locally to generate economic impact. Where UMA sees LBIs actively working today, which are in cities across the country, we see that they're creating new resources, programs, infrastructure, and market opportunities. We see them increasing connections, opening new access to key resources such as markets, capital, talent, real estate, et cetera. And we see increased engagement of tailored technical and creative assistance programs in the development of new programs. We also see programs that support manufacturing businesses at all stages of development, whether that's a solo entrepreneur or a business with over 100 employees. We see resources that BIPOC women and immigrant entrepreneurs trust and seek out. And we see increased engagement with local and state governments, helping create new small business networks. And through our research, we really are identifying that the keys to LBIs being successful is that they are focusing on equity from the very beginning. They're creating inclusive strategies in order to make sure everyone has equal access to the opportunities, resources, programs, and networks that are being created. There's diverse stakeholder engagement, which means that policymakers, real estate organizations, capital access organizations, et cetera, are all part of the conversation. And we see that they're creating partnerships and collaborations that leverage and scale existing resources and programs. And this slide shows 7 LBIs across the country, and this isn't everyone. Part of the work that we're currently wrapping up with through collaboration with LISC is a report on what local brandings are and how they work. And for each of these, we're putting together a case study, and we're looking forward to being able to share that with you soon. But again, just kind of a high-level example. Made in Baltimore is a local branding initiative that started in 2017, and in just a short amount of time, they have developed a network of over 300 members, which includes makers and manufacturers, as well as retail outlets that specialize in selling locally made products. The initiative is housed at the Economic Development Corporation in Baltimore. And they have a series of different programs. Some of the ones that are most unique to them are the Home Run Business Accelerator, which is an accelerator program specifically for makers that are currently working out of home but want to scale their business and lease commercial space, as well as their biennial local book. Seattle Made is an LBI that's housed at the Seattle Good Business Network. They've grown to support over 650 members. They support a higher concentration of food and beverage manufacturers. So I think it's about 40% of their membership are in that manufacturing sector. And they've built a series of entrepreneurial kind of collaborations themselves. And so they're creating opportunities that both create income for their organization, but also increase the market opportunities for some of their makers. And then last quick example is Bridgeway Capital's Creative Business Accelerator, which is a unique program. It's housed at a CDFI. And the initial motivation for creating this program was to find new channels to help create loan access programs for makers and manufacturers. When we study all these LBIs, we see that there's also common programs, right? Such as branding resources, technical assistance, peer-to-peer networks, and real estate networks. So even though each program, each organization is responding to its local context, there are some similarities that UMA is finding and promoting. So just to kind of bring all this to Milwaukee, what's been happening over the past few months, and actually this is a much longer time span, but it's been a little bit more concentrated recently, is we've been having conversations around how do LBIs get started. And so what's on the screen now is really a kind of a timeline or a series of phases that UMA has identified that is necessary to get a local branding initiative off the ground. And most of the conversations we've been having recently have really been in this kind of early, almost pre-development phase called Connect. And the work of the Connect phase is to really uncover interested contributors, to organize completed work and existing insights, to gain early buy-in, and to build early ecosystem connections to uncover resources and support. And so for the past, I think we started in December, the Menominee Valley Partners, LISC Milwaukee, City of Milwaukee, and UMA has been having a kind of informal working group conversation to really kind of educate one another on what's happened, what the opportunities are, and to kind of dig deeper into what the local branding initiative opportunity really is. And one of the things that we've kind of uncovered is just how much work has already been going on and how this conversation has been really forming over a few years. Urban Manufacturing Alliance did a convening. Milwaukee was part of our State of Urban Manufacturing report. The industrial land use report was just completed, and this is a longer list, but this is just kind of a snapshot of what's been happening in this kind of early Connect phase. And so that's kind of where we are today, and why we wanted to have this conversation is to really, share this conversation, kind of broaden the audience of people who are interested in this conversation, and to really find out where the opportunities lie to help make the visions that you all shared possible. So I'll stop my screen, sharing my screen. And so ultimately, I just want to acknowledge that was a very high level description of what local branding initiatives are. And we have lots of material, and we'll share it with everybody afterwards. We have a long kind of PDF with more in-depth descriptions of what LBIs are, links to the different organizations across the country, and are happy to share case studies and examples for everybody. But again, with today's kind of framing of today's conversation, part of what those of us have been kind of chatting about the last 2 months is really the bigger question of who else on this call or beyond this call could be interested in being part of this larger kind of working group conversation. And with that, what I'll do is kind of open it up to any initial kind of thoughts or questions, anything else that you all have been part of that maybe we need to add to our list in terms of helping uncover what type of conversations have been happening around local branding initiatives, and what and maybe you all haven't even been using that kind of language. Any conversations around entrepreneurial ecosystems or creating new access to key resources and making manufacturing. Those are the types of things we're interested in learning about and interested in connecting to. And Elmer, I'm not sure if you have any specific kind of add-ons to that, given.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I'm excited because this is the part where we get you guys talking again. That's right, Jessica. So I got an odd question for you. What's your sense of the willingness for there to be a Milwaukee, like a Milwaukee that includes all of us collaboration?
I can go. So what you described, I think, and I don't want to speak for any of my colleagues who are running industrial bids, so feel free to contradict me or if I have the wrong feel on this, but I think that many of us have been doing exactly what you've described, Andrew. I think what my organization probably, I mean, we're having the branding conversations, the finding the resources and all of that in a very strategic and formal way. I think what we've lacked is the way to better package it and the capacity to really run with it and make it something substantial. So it's always just been kind of part of our overall strategy, but I don't think we've been effective at messaging it in the way that you have, Andrew. So that would be our barrier. To answer your question, Elmer, I think that we would be very interested, in helping to promote Milwaukee as, a maker community and brand it in that way. But we also don't want to get lost. We don't want our brand to get lost in that larger picture either. So that's just preliminary thoughts on all of that.
Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
And our brand meaning the Havenwoods brand as, yeah. Any other thoughts about that? About, this sort of inclusive Milwaukee that's inclusive of all the places as a collaborative effort, and what else might be happening that we're not including in the conversation already? What else might be happening already that we're not including in this?
I guess to me,
Yeah.
it feels like we're missing, like we have so much neighborhood pride, and there's like the Bronzeville Collective or the Sherman Phoenix, or we even talked about like a Made in the Valley thing at one point, and it's like it's all of these little tiny, like much smaller things, and it's like, how do we create this really amazing umbrella that is like Milwaukee made? There's so much like local pride. How can we really tap into that and help our local makers and manufacturers just build into like a much grander communications, marketing, promotion of all of the great work that they're doing. I just keep feeling like we're missing this opportunity to capitalize on a bigger like local pride versus neighborhood. I think neighborhood pride is great, but I would love to see the broader picture too.
Yeah.
And
I'll remind you that there can be there's also just Milwaukee pride for the rest of the world, and to embed in that not only the technical resources to get some of these makers and manufacturing businesses onto a world stage, but also the branding resource of what does it mean to be made in Milwaukee to someone in California. We get to define that. I'd love, Renee, for you to just tell me what you mean by the Orthodox community. What are you thinking there?
I was just throwing different groups that were popping around in my head. I think we often forget some of the groups that we can't quite always see. Whether it be the Asian American, because they've got a bunch of things just going, or the Orthodox. We often have a meeting on a Saturday, or just time, and then also their special unique needs, the kosher, and then kind of cool products that could go around that. So I just threw out some of those.
Yeah.
And then if we had Those are the other things.
I'm with Michelle. I love the concept. I think the time is ripe right now to do something like this. I'm not sure if we had the energy or it was the right moment before this. The one large group that strikes me, and maybe you are talking to them separately, is the folks who would be using the branding. I think a lot of us that are on the call are the ones who it's coming from a top down. Hey, this is great for your brand and it helps build it, but really understanding what their lead times are on product and packaging and where they would place it. And if they see the value in it and want to buy into this concept, or if it feels like something that's just another thing they have to do or pay for to be part of, without understanding and maybe seeing the ROI on where it might open up revenue streams or branding or other connections to them that does not exist currently. I also think I'm really big on peer learning formats, and I think entrepreneurs naturally do a really good job of connecting when they have time and space to do that. And I think that's the other component that could be part of this as a natural fallout from others that are part of the group, but there may need to be some facilitation and connections, especially around food or packaging or natural synergies that others might see that the entrepreneur had not occurred to them, or really figuring out like, what else do you need? Who else are you not connecting with that this could be an opportunity for facilitation? So we're thinking about the broader value chain of the creation of a product or service instead of just the end component.
Kelsey, I'll just say I love where your brain is going, and I will hopefully provide some comfort in telling you the conversations we've had with other cities by necessity and by design is playing out in two parts. There's a conversation that we have with organizations like the ones here, and then we have an additional conversation with makers and manufacturers. And the structure of these initiatives needs to be collaborative and with the administering organizations acting to empower the makers and manufacturers to build what makes sense to them, not what makes sense for them from our perspective. Even though oftentimes this community of folks is sitting on both sides of it. Like, I was a manufacturer, so I have, and I'm not the only person in here who is a business owner. I don't think. No one wanted to jump up on that one. Okay, fine. All right.
I thank you, Andrew, for the presentation. That was helpful. It's helpful to hear what other cities are doing. Yeah, and just listen to people's comments about like neighborhood versus city. And I wonder if there's like a certain sector, the makers community or the manufacturing community, that like a local branding initiative makes the most sense for, or just, I was struck by like Seattle is mostly like, beverage and food, for example. And I don't know if that would be, translate to Milwaukee necessarily, because I agree with what was just said about needing to reach out to the makers community more directly. But yeah, and I understand that people's capacity is limited as well. But yeah, maybe target, trying it, launching it with a certain sector within the manufacturing or makers community might be one way to approach it. So
yeah, and one of the things we're trying to kind of learn through this most recent research is how the different LBIs have either uncovered uncovered concentration of businesses and how they might have been able to kind of follow that in their specific region. For the most part, it really is the model that we're talking about would definitely be made to fit your region. And so from my understanding, there might be a larger concentration of large manufacturers in Milwaukee, say, compared to Seattle or to Baltimore. And so that might be one of the starting points is thinking about how do you get conversations going with those larger businesses, while also keeping awareness to the fact that the smaller solo entrepreneurs or 5-person businesses are going to have different needs. And so part of our kind of initial building phases will be community outreach, connecting to businesses of all sizes, really getting that kind of more tailored understanding of what the concentrations may be in the region. And then if it turns out the kind of early adopters or the earliest to buy in are kind of all across the spectrum, there's ways of responding to that too. So one of the things I really appreciate everybody's sharing of the different initiatives that are already going and ongoing, and sharing some of the kind of early maybe kind of struggles in terms of like getting things moving and getting things to a larger scale. One of the things that I find really exciting about working in Milwaukee is the fact that there are all these different strong neighborhoods that already have kind of their own cultures, as well as these strong industrial areas that also have their own kind of branding and messaging. And I think that there's definitely opportunities to find ways to, as was said, like grow the sort of understanding of Milwaukee for larger audiences without trumping all those kind of smaller, more culturally kind of diverse initiatives. And so part of what UMA is interested in is helping regions like yours kind of bring the ecosystem together, learn how to like incorporate all the different voices and different kind of diverse interests, as well as continue to make it an equitable system.
I have a random question. Oh, you can go, Celia.
I was just going to say, for context, when I joined this conversation initially, when I heard local branding initiative, my mind really did go right towards the branding effort of what something like this would be. But as I spoke to some of you, or what I feel that I heard is that the need for collaboration in supporting makers goes beyond like the branding part of it into more focused technical assistance. So we have quite a few technical assistance providers in Milwaukee, but who are the ones that have the capacity to be really good at supporting the maker space, the manufacturing space directly, right, beyond small business operations more generally. And then two, something that I think all of us could collaborate on that Monica has spoken to is like, what are the challenges in how we zone property or own property that we can work collaboratively on in supporting manufacturers as well. So, you know, for example, getting small scale manufacturers into mixed use commercial properties along corridors. So I almost feel like that those are like the conversations that really can bring us together and hopefully could lead to supporting more of like a coaching or mentoring or support system for manufacturers that can kind of come out of this type of collaboration. So I guess I just want to encourage us to think beyond what local branding initiative sounds like to what it could be for the purposes of supporting everybody in Milwaukee. Sorry, Kelsey.
No, I love that. I completely agree. I think this is like a multi-layer approach, and the branding is a really strong component of that, but will maybe not be as successful without some of the more systemic collaborative opportunities that exist. My question was very random. Are there incentives in place at other cities, like a loyalty program on the consumer end, if you're like, that you could get credit or points feeling like you're shopping at certain places, or incentives on the more of the manufacturing or direct to corporation type of opportunities that can be incentivized to use local or organizations that are part of this versus going with who you've always used?
Andrew, before I let you give the technical answer, can I give a softer answer first? So I've been fortunate enough to have a conversation somewhat like the one we're having with a number of other cities. And I think the very important thing to mention is LBI's local branding initiatives look the way they should look for the city. And the visioning exercise that we went through, you all could easily imagine that we could build an instrument to get to that place, and it would look, all the cities would want the same thing. And in fact, when you ask other communities to sort of envision what success looks like, they come up with very, very different things. And so their LBIs are designed to achieve their results. So I'd say the first structured incentive is an LBI that is valuable. And so the incentive is, I want to participate because I get value out of it. And it solves a specific, or addresses a specific need for makers and manufacturers here. If it turned out that in another community they needed to incentivize it, incentivize participation in some other way, we could build that in. I believe for us in Milwaukee, and I'm putting on my Milwaukee hat, that we could very easily just make something easy for folks to use, exciting for them to be a part of, that gives them way more value than they have to invest. And it would just be, it's more than being a megaphone as the brand. It's actually being I'm a sucker for using a lot of different analogies. So it's being a megaphone. It's also being the lubricant for all the processes that they have to endure. It's being a telephone wire from when people use corded phones to connect them to organizations and to other makers. And finally, it's just being a cheerleader for them because they all need it and want it. So that's the intro to the answer for Andrew to slam dunk.
Well, I'll try to make the technical answer exciting. No one, from our research so far, we haven't found any LBIs that have created a kind of incentive for customers to like buy into it. There are some really interesting models in the UK that has actually created a funding opportunity to help people buy more locally made stuff because they have the opportunity to sort of invest larger dollars in sort of more durable goods. But and a more kind of interesting development that's just at its kind of beginning is creating a locally made certification process, with the idea being that you could then engage with procurement offices in both like local government as well as like anchor institutions to say, you know, we're going to create the certification process. You as a procurement office can spend your millions and millions of dollars in a way that's making this positive impact, so that because we're hearing in other cities from the procurement conversation, they want to be making those local purchases, but they don't know where to go or how to trust, you know, what's being made. So LBIs are potentially going to be that intermediary to say, well, we'll make that certification process easy, which then becomes a market opportunity for the local manufacturers to be part of that kind of certification process. So there is lots of interest in that, and it's and people are just starting to get involved in that. Portland Made, for example, just funded a research project kind of looking into the feasibility of that certification process.
Okay, so I want to be mindful of the time. Do you all have us? Do we have you for another few minutes? Yes. All right. Good. So, I think a passport. I totally just lost my train of thought. I don't know if you heard it, just screeching, derailing. So, Kelsey, have a great weekend. So actually, before I let you go, Kelsey loves the idea. I guess I want to know from everyone. We agree that the juice is worth the squeeze. Are you interested in participating in future conversations about this? I'm asking that in a low lift commitment, at a low lift of commitment. Thank you so much, Celia's barista, for taking care of her.
Thanks.
Yes, Meg.
jump in. I think I'm like a little different kind than what others on this conversation do, but I am happy to be of assistance anywhere I can. So, I work at Visit Milwaukee. Our job is to attract people to the city. And to the extent that we also tell the stories that are going on in the city. So those are the two pots or the pools of relevance. So let me know where I can jump in, and I'm happy to do that.
I love that. And let me just say, Meg, in a lot of ways, Visit Milwaukee is the steward of the Milwaukee brand to the outside world. And so we're going to definitely need your partnership for this to be a success. Thank you.
And I'm in.
All right. And all your money.
Now I'm out.
Okay. So I think there was a general feeling of we're interested in continuing the conversation. What we're doing is working on identifying what each of our roles is before we get to a place where we start administering. There's additional constituents to bring together. Like I said before, it's really important that we have a healthy conversation with our makers and our manufacturers so that we can design what makes sense for them. So our two asks are, one, who wants to continue, and two, and we're gonna reconvene this group to continue imagining and so on. Two is we're gonna need some help pulling together a representative community of makers and manufacturers. And I'm saying that like it's no big deal, but it's really hard. It's really hard because I want them to be representative. And that means geographically representative, as well as obviously we are deeply committed to being racially equitable. But we want to see manufacturers of makers and manufacturers of all types. And so when that ask comes, I'm going to ask you to be as assertive and aggressive in helping us convene those people as possible. Is that reasonable? All right. What other questions might y'all have? Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Celia, you just got recaffeinated, so. Lots of energy. Okay.
Are you looking at like a time frame? Andrew, or maybe it's both of you, you listed kind of those phases of all the stages of putting this whole thing together. Are you guys looking at a time frame and kind of what those next steps of grabbing these people and how we can participate? So what's your time frame for this next phase?
Yesterday. So the next phase, actually the next phase is until we're done this phase. And from my perspective, this phase includes the conversation with the makers. So, let's be reasonable. Next week is my birthday. So we're talking about mid to late February. And so sometime next week, we will follow up with the folks that have shown some interest in this conversation and ask for everyone's participation in drafting that community of makers and manufacturers.
Cool beans. We're in.
Amen, you are. So the fun thing is, again, I am participating in this conversation as a part of the design team and the UMA team, but I am real willing to be Milwaukee, Elmer, and bully y'all. So I asked who wants to participate, but the reality is like everybody's in. Like you're all in. Monica, you too. Don't front. I'll bully you. Andrew, what else?
I think that's, I don't have anything else off the top of my head. Like, I think the real kind of, to answer your question, Renee, like we see most LBIs, like once they've got that initial kind of funding and they're just like committed to it and somebody's thinking about this every day when they wake up, usually, within 6 months, there's initial programming had been designed, initial collaborations are being made, ecosystems are being formed. And so we're kind of in this connect phase, which is also about finding those initial kind of resources so that this conversation can continue itself. We have heard a little bit of, there's been fits and starts, and as you all said, there's like you're all kind of working on different things, and again, we want to acknowledge those and support those. So part of what we want to see in order to make this really long-term sustainably impactful is that a kind of initial, what we like to say, sort of seed and startup funding, which is part of what, as the working group moving forward, that's what we're really going to tackle, is how does this get going? We typically see LBIs, after 2 years, got some stability, have some impacts, have built their network of businesses they're supporting. And so within a 2-year frame, we see measurable impacts. And so it's, so these things can happen rapidly, especially given how many people are already at the table. It's really, and I should also say, part of UMA's process is to start doing it from the beginning, right? So whether you know it or not, you're all part of the LBI conversation today. And so it's, we're actively doing the work while talking about doing the work. And so the connect phase can kind of transition as quickly as it can based on how we can uncover those resources and who the partners are at the table.
Okay, so in two wrapping comments. One, before you hang up, please do write in the chat what I should do this weekend, and if there's something interesting that I need to know about. And then two, oh yeah, good point, Melanie. And two, thanks y'all. I don't know, we don't have I don't think we have a good culture of being grateful for the work that is being done. And so I just want to let y'all know I'm grateful. I'm not a native Milwaukeean, but I'm excited to have co-conspirators in making this place the best place it can be. And you're just making it better for my life. So I appreciate y'all. I'm excited for this. And as promised, I wanted to share this with you. I'll put the link in the chat too. But this is, oh, wait, I didn't push the right button. Hold on. When I wake up in the morning, love, and the sunlight hurts my eyes. Oh man, come. This, can you all hear that? Good.
Could before.
You could be, well, now it's hopefully a little better. This is Studio Brazil. Studio Rio presents The Brazil Connection. It's a bunch of remixes of cool songs. I want to share this with you. I'll drop the link in the chat. And until then, yeah, we'll see you soon.